Yeah, good morning, everybody. Welcome into the Party Line program here on All Nine Radio. Wednesday morning, August the 1st, 2007. Bill Buchanan, your host. We are here every day, Monday through Friday, from 8:30 to 9-ish, with interesting guests and topics, and we certainly have that going for us here today, as a matter of fact. We'll get, as I was thinking about how to open this, I was thinking about a book that was a real favorite of mine back many years ago, written by John F. Kennedy, called Profiles in Courage, that brought him a lot of in that book to courage as grace under pressure. On the fire station that says, in an emergency we perform as we have been trained. When Mike George with the Dayton News did a story about this, he had a headline called Courage Under Fire, and I think every one of those lines applies very nicely to our guest of our program this morning, Scott Engle, who works the staff down there for your obvious loss. I won't go into a lot of detail. I know it's not a pleasant subject, but nevertheless, our sympathies to Channel 13 and the loss of Marvin Zimmerman. All right, now, first of all, we're going to talk a lot about the events. Like, I'm kidding. You get to say something. Say good morning, Bill.
Good morning, Bill.
Okay. Oh, he's well trained, isn't he?
Absolutely.
Good to have you. No, seriously.
Thank you.
Kevin, tell us a little bit about you and where you're from, and your wife, if you will, and your family and everything. And let's just get to know Kevin Purtee a little bit better for a moment.
Okay, well, first off, thanks a lot for having me this morning. We really appreciate it. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk about some of the really good work going on in Iraq right now, and I know that's a complex subject. I was actually born in Kansas. I've lived all over, been in the military, active duty, got out in the 90s. Went to work for a chemical company as a safety manager, found my way to Houston via that company, and took about a 7-year break from the military and joined the National Guard 3 weeks before September 11th. I told my boss that he would not notice that I was in the National Guard. And
Oops!
I spent 3 of the last 6 years on active duty. Of course, after all that, Reichelt, my employer, they have been very supportive through all this, and I really appreciate that. One wife, one cat, live out there in Whiteman.
Okay, and the address is Dayton, Texas.
Yes, sir.
Which is what brings us together here this
Right.
morning, the fact that you are a local fellow.
Was on active duty for many years, and was flying helicopters. Worked the safety thing as kind of an additional duty or an extra duty, and found out.
And when did you get into helicopter flight training and those kinds of things?
Well, I'd always wanted to be a pilot, a military pilot. I got my pilot's license when I was a teenager, and of course that's an expensive hobby. Finishing college and maybe going to flight school there. And that's training. Got Apache attack helicopters, which has been a fortunate choice, and I'm real glad. We are, just like a sergeant major will be outranked by a second lieutenant, I am outranked by a second lieutenant. Second lieutenant in my unit better not let that go to his head, of course.
And don't you forget it.
Exactly. So that's and of course we train young people. About half the warrant officers in the Army are pilots. The other half do technical skills on the ground, and you're very focused on your specialty. For about 2 years, and for the rest of your career, they call you chief. So,
Yeah. All right. Well, Chief, it's great to have you with us in our studios, and you've been home all these 2 weeks now.
Yes, sir.
Or something like that. And events, right?
For this Iraq War, I was in Desert Storm.
Okay. And talk to us a little bit about the events of June 30th.
Okay, no problem. I'll try not to bore folks with details. There are 24 helicopters, 400 folks, about 70 pilots, once you count all the staff folks. I'm basically an airfield called Balad, which is north of Baghdad, and we basically belong to the highest headquarters there in Iraq to be sent wherever it is that we need to be sent.
Of June the 30th. And this is the story, incidentally, that Mike George of the Dayton News first brought to our attention, and with some pretty good page 1 coverage of the Dayton News story.
Sure.
And it was an exciting story. It sounded like a pretty exciting day in your life.
It was my biggest day as a helicopter pilot, without question. My biggest day of the tour, and yeah, no question, my was with us to a town called Ramadi, where we spent the year working, did a lot of milk run, intro.
Baptism?
Right. And it turned into a pretty big night for everybody. Due to some political things, our intent was to go show them some stuff, land, get a cup of coffee, and go home. And show them the general area, and they start seeing tracer fire out in the distance, and they start calling the ground bosses.
Come talk to their school group or to their service club or to their community organization. I'm not asking you to give things like personal things like phone numbers, but will you allow us to have that kind of information, and then we'll supply it to anybody who calls here?
Sure.
Mike, I'm sure. Mike, anything
Yes?
we should have touched on and didn't? I know you'll correct me if we did. You're coming back here in just a very few days. We're just not
Yeah,
sure
well,
when.
whenever you tell me what day it is, I think we got something brewing up, and of course today's when tickets go on sale for the.
Sure.
Okay, first of all, your name?
Kevin Purtee.
P-U-R-T-E-E.
Correct.
Kevin, give me a rundown of what happened, this mission that you were on and the rescue.
Okay. On the 30th of June, our last combat mission, myself and another aircraft from our unit took 2 other aircraft from the relieving unit on a orientation combat mission to Ramadi, which is a city in Iraq. And Ramadi had been very quiet. That night, ironically, it turns out that we found quite a fight south of the city. We had a young man, one of the ground soldiers, get wounded in that fight. Actually, there were 4 individuals wounded. We had an opportunity to pick up one of those wounded soldiers. We were waiting on medevac for him. The ground commander was waiting on a medevac helicopter for him. Not coming. We saw an opportunity to do an unorthodox casualty evacuation. We landed. My front seater, Chief Crist, got out. This is in the middle of the desert, in the middle of the fight. Put this young man in the front seat of the helicopter and strapped him in, and we flew him back to Camp Ar Ramadi into medical care.
Now, you were talking, there was a truck that you'd spotted, the 18-wheeler.
Yes, sir.
Describe that a little bit.
Actually, the first team, the other team, were the ones who got involved in that. They found this fight before we did, and we stayed. First we got refuel, and then we stayed out of their way while they prosecuted the fight. And the ground commander had asked my friend Jim to destroy this 18-wheeler truck in the vicinity where this fight was going on. And Jim has to slow down and basically hover up to this truck to avoid hitting friendlies with his fire. He shoots this truck, and it was the biggest explosion that any of us had seen in Iraq, and we had seen several. And the explosion went to easily 1,000 feet, we think, and the smoke plume went to maybe 2,000. It was incredible. I was several miles away. I asked on the radio if Jim was okay, and he assured me that he was, but the explosion did in fact move the helicopter. This is an 8-ton helicopter that it moved. So that was kind of the kickoff for this, what ended up for us a 6-hour fight.
Now, when you asked them, tell me a little more, we were talking earlier about having to get this young man into there, his size and his reaction, everything else. Once you saw, you asked your co-pilot about staying on the ground. And
Right. We saw an opportunity, and if I can give just a little introduction to this, on a couple of occasions, more than one occasion, we had been frustrated to watch bad things happen to young people on the ground while they were waiting for medevac. And we had discussed before, can we do this? It's been done before. We've put wounded people in Apaches, and it's a 2-seat helicopter not designed for transport. We've put people in the front seat and taken them out and gotten them medical care, or just rescued them if they were okay, strap on the sides and go. But Al and I talked, and this was a good opportunity for maybe one of those 4 casualties, more if we needed to do it, for one of those casualties to get a quicker ride versus waiting on the medevac folks. As it turns out, they had a good candidate. He could stay upright in the helicopter. He was conscious. He was hurt badly enough to warrant the extra effort. And they told us where they had evacuated their casualties to preliminary. We landed at that spot. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot my point. I asked Alan if he would be willing to stay on the ground. I'd drop him off on the ground and take this young man back to Ramadi, and I would come back and get Alan. And he said, absolutely not will I stay on the ground. There's a big fight going on. That's not what we do. And he says, but I am happy to strap on the side of the helicopter, and you can take me back with you. And I said, that's an excellent point. That's why you're smarter than I am. I appreciate it. And bless his heart, he did just that. He gave up his seat to that wounded soldier. I had, I think I mentioned to you in a discussion earlier that we're landing in the desert at night, big dust cloud and all that drama, and I can't shut the helicopter down. There's a firefight in the vicinity, and so as they're putting this very large young man in my front seat, he's kicking the control stick forward, and the rotor blades as a result are starting to dip down, and I'm scared that they're going to take off portions of the helicopter. It was a nervous moment. I'm gently pulling them back so as to not create more issues, but we survived that okay. And when we took him back to the camp, back to medical care, I was able to shut the helicopter down so you don't have all that drama of trying to load a guy who's never been in a helicopter, who just got shot literally in the face, who's probably on some sort of pain medication, not very steady on his feet. You don't have the drama of trying to drag that guy out of a running helicopter.
What about now when you got back? You saw him the next day. Tell us a little bit. Tell me about a little bit.
Right. We were really fortunate in that he was evacuated to where Alan and I are stationed, and some of our leadership coordinated an opportunity to go over and talk to him in the hospital, and that was very.
Hang on a second.
Sure, no problem.
Oh, Mike. Okay. No idea. Let's go back. Start at the airfield again.
Okay, so we found out that the young man that we had evacuated was at the hospital at Balad where we were stationed, and had an opportunity to ride over and see him. And he was pretty drugged up, as you would expect, but he looked a lot better than he did the night before. In fact, for a guy that had taken a pretty serious wound, he looked to be in pretty good spirits. Jaw wired shut, so he couldn't talk, so he was riding on a pad. And the first thing he wrote to us was thank you, which was, I thought, very gracious on his part. And the next thing that he wrote was sorry for messing up your helicopter. He was talking about getting his blood in the helicopter. It's like, no worries, partner. We can get the helicopter clean for you. And he's turned out, don't know him very well, but the little bit of dealings we've had with him, he's the hero. You know, he's the guy who went out on a Humvee and with his buddies. He emailed me last week, and he said, you know, again, thank you guys for what you did. You know, thank you, young man. Anyway, thank you guys for what you did. I'm back with my family. He says, and this is not the way I wanted to come back. He says, I wanted to stay with my guys in Iraq. Imagine that. You got a wife and 2 kids. Yeah, what a stellar young man. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, you're from Dayton, right?
Yes, sir.
Family?
My wife lives in Dayton with me.
What got you? You were in private sector and then decided to go military, or what got you going there?
I was active duty for several years flying Apaches. I got tired of it and got a safety job in Houston. And then after a 6-7 year break, I went back in the National Guard because I missed flying, and also to recover that military retirement. I had several years already invested. And that was 3 weeks before September 11th. And went from what was supposed to be a part-time job that my boss didn't notice to I've basically been gone 3 of the last 6 years from my job.
What about getting? I mean, you're staying with military or reservists now, or what are you going to do?
Yes, sir. I'll stay in the National Guard. Sure will. And
chance for deployment again?
Certainly. I hope not. I've had about 3 of those in the last 5 years. I'm ready to take a break.
You were talking earlier about your wife. I mean, what the family has to put up, here at home.
That's tough, and she's tough, and she's put up with Desert Storm, 2 tours in Bosnia, and now a year in Iraq, which is a dangerous deal. And she's tough, and I think she represents the spouses of the military in a very positive way. She makes that house run. She gets the bills paid. She manages everything. Something breaks, she fixes it. She takes the trash out. All those things. We don't have kids, okay? It's just 10 times more complicated for the folks that have kids, of course. And the spouses make all that happen while the service member's gone. Service member's kind of out on an adventure in a way. Sometimes a little dicey, but out on an adventure. The spouse at home is just suffering through it and hoping that his or her service member doesn't get killed or hurt.
What can you say to kids out here? I mean, you got, like Bill was saying a minute ago, you got a lot of young men wanting to go military. And I know he made a comment which I kind of liked too, which caught my attention there. Which caught my attention was the point about the parents, worried about the kids. Oh, why don't you get a job down here instead of going to the military?
Right.
What can you say about that?
if I was allowed to give career advice to a young person, I would certainly recommend military as a career option. Right now, particularly to parents, that sounds like a dangerous deal. Well, there's a couple of things. One, it may be worth doing even if it's dangerous, probably is. Two, there are a lot of jobs that really don't expose you to harm at the same level as some of those frontline jobs, and there's lots of those jobs out there. And the military has been a wonderful career for me over the course of the past 25 years. It has fed me and my family, clothed me and my family, got me college, paid the bills at least supplementally. It'll provide for a wonderful retirement, and I've had a ball. I've had a grand time. I mean, what a good deal.
More of you love the flying. You like
Sure
is it the flying or the excitement or what is it?
I think there's some adrenaline involved with the flying that makes it a lot of fun, and during the course of our year in Iraq, we were in an active fight on several occasions, but it wasn't a daily thing. And I will admit that there's an adrenaline rush that comes with that. That's kind of fun. It sure is. It's cool to be able to go out and do the job that you were trained for.
What have you seen most of the young men down there? I mean, you said there's you're seeing this every day, day in, day out. These guys on the ground. You go in having to help these guys out. They're basically held down with fire from the enemy forces. What y'all having to go in there and try to help these guys? There's situations where you see it's hard to even get into there to do something for them, and how does that affect you?
Absolutely. So much of the fight involves fighting an elusive enemy who is dressed in civilian clothes, who knows the area, maybe an urban area, and he just goes inside. Well, you can't just shoot up the house. You know, you're not allowed to do that. You can't do that. That's inappropriate. So they'll do a lot of hit and run, and then they hit our ground forces. And so what we would end up doing for those ground forces to the best of our ability is provide a presence and overwatch. I mean, they're big, noisy, scary machines. They tend to drive people's heads down. So we did that a lot. We would provide overwatch and cover and really a presence.
All right. Got it.
Got all you need?
Sent to the DPS, and if it does, then we send that also.